Welcome to Spotlight Sessions, where we shine
What's
a light
your story?
on incredible. What does accessibility mean to you?
What's your mission? Welcome all to accessiBe's Spotlight Sessions, where we shine a light on incredible individuals and organizations and the work that they do. I'm your host, Josh Basil. I'm a C4-5 quadriplegic, paralyzed below my shoulders, and a power wheelchair user. I'm the Community Relations Manager at accessiBe and a passionate disability rights advocate and trial attorney, focused on breaking down barriers to access and inclusion for people with disabilities. Today on accessiBe Spotlight Sessions, we're joined by Stuart James, the Executive Director of Ability Center. Welcome, Stuart.
Well, hi, thanks for having me.
I'm excited to share your story and to share that of Ability Center. So let's dive right in. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, my name is Stuart James. Obviously, I have osteogenesis imperfecta. I use a wheelchair. I'm a dad of 3 and 4-year-olds, and I've done a bit of traveling in my time, and now I've landed here in Toledo, and pretty excited about it.
And how did you make your way to Toledo and the Ability Center?
I was running the Independent Living Center in Berkeley, and looking to move closer to home. And so this opportunity came up, and I run across Tim Harrington, the previous ED, a couple of times at various conferences. And so I thought it was kind of interesting place to be. My wife was a little bit like, Toledo, I'm not so sure. But she had to look it up because she's from China. And but when we came, this is just really a wonderful place.
And so tell us about the work and the offerings of the Ability Center and how it's providing great services to the disability community.
Yeah, we provide all the independent living services that you'd find everywhere else. But in addition to that, we do dogs. So we train assistance dogs here. And that's kind of a pillar program. I think we've just revitalized our youth program, and they're doing amazing things at the moment. We have a special concentration on 0 to 12 at the moment, and dealing with families who are just getting acquainted with their child's disability and giving them some different perspective on what the future looks like. And we do a lot of marketing here. It's my background because I didn't come from the disability movement. I spent much of my time working in sports and entertainment on the marketing side. And so it's really getting people to learn about disability and see it in a different way and raising the expectations people with disabilities have of themselves.
Let's talk more about that. Why is that important, and how are the different ways that you do that to raise those expectations?
Well, to answer the first part of that question, why it's important, you're an advocate, right? So we both meet we spend a lot of time with state legislators or federal legislators. They may understand the words coming out of my mouth, but the vision in my head is not the same as the vision in their head. And so we're not really having the same conversation. And so it's important for me to educate them and get them to see the picture I got in my head. And then we can really make some progress. How do we go about it? I really think that this is a problem across all movement. It's not specific to disability, but we tend to talk about the challenges of a problem, like people with disabilities are disproportionately poor. It's true. People with disabilities, have trouble finding work, or employers don't hire. Maybe that's true. I think there's some myth to that. But when we have those conversations, we're kind of in a vicious cycle, right? We're pointing out all the problems. We're not pointing out the people who do very well, like yourself or like me. And so society doesn't realize that's part of the equation. And kids with disabilities or people with newly acquired disabilities don't realize that that's part of the equation. and that life may not be all doom and gloom. And so we got to start highlighting the good to balance the bad in some cases, if that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. It's too often, I think, you perpetuate what story you've been fed or what you're being told or what narrative. And too often, and I've seen this a lot in the employment world, people have heard of all these horror stories of becoming employed and then losing maybe your benefits, which for people with spinal cord injuries, oftentimes the only place you can go for long-term care supports like caregiving, attendants, nurses, and to have that in the home is through Medicaid. And all of a sudden they enter the working world and they lose all of their Medicaid and benefits. But that doesn't have to be the case. With the rights of benefits counselors, right? Programs, if you get into the Medicaid buy-in programs, 1619B through Social Security, there's all these work incentive programs that do exist. But if you don't know about them and you don't apply for them, you can't benefit from them. But like you said, it's being able to highlight more of the success stories is creates that different narrative of, oh my God, if he can do it or she can do it, I can do it too. And these are the different steps or paths that they took to get there. And learning from each other and learning from each other's successes and struggles. So you're 100% on point.
Oh, that's totally true. And to further that, I think it's unique to Silicon Valley because a lot of the companies there are cash rich. But Google, for example, if you need attendant care, they build it in as part of your benefit package, and so it doesn't come out of your salary, and that way you don't need to worry about the thresholds, and they pay $50 an hour, so they're paying better than anybody else in the market. And I think we need to start incentivizing more companies to do that kind of thing. I mean, I think we should spend more time on getting social services revamped to focus on assisting people back into the workforce, as opposed to keeping them in poverty, which sometimes it
Absolutely.
does.
And the more that we can get people with disabilities into the workplace, you then change the narrative even more. Because if you have a business that everybody looks the same, talks the same, walks the same, and just does everything the same, it's a very static world. But if you have a diverse workforce and you're inclusive and you bring in as many different skills and talents from as many different people, you really create the best package for that business growing and actually also reaching as many different consumers that exist out there. The representation within expands to the representation outside, even from a marketing standpoint as well.
Absolutely, it's the differences between people, and regardless of whether it is physical ability or race or culture or religion or whatever, that's what makes the world interesting.
And you were mentioning earlier about one of your services with service dogs. Can you talk more about that and how people can who's the target market for that? What do the service dogs do? How do you get them?
So we do three versions of service dogs. One goes into the school system. We call them facility dogs. The facility dogs generally help any kid. It doesn't have to be a kid with a disability necessarily. It could be someone who's, going through grief, or they've lost a parent, they've lost someone. It could be a child who's getting bullied. It could be a child with cognitive disabilities who just struggles to make friends, or autism. And so those dogs work usually with a guidance counselor, and they sort of patrol the school with the guidance counselor. They go where they're needed. Kids can book sessions with them, and we find that it's just an amazing thing. The dog will last about 8 years in the school system, so it's helping hundreds and hundreds of kids over the course of its working life. And then,
That's
we
awesome.
have assistance dogs. They help people primarily with physical disabilities, so they can do a lot of task oriented things. They have public access. They're the only ones of the dogs that have public access. But they can pick things up for you. They can help you put laundry in and out of the washing machine, pull a duvet cover down for you. We are now working. I have a dog over here to my right that I keep pointing to. You can't see. But this one over here is working on paying a person with a credit card and getting the receipt of my credit card back. Um, And so they're doing these really amazing things. And they also, in the same capacity, help break the barrier between people with disabilities and those without, because the dog tends to be the bridge. And then we just have therapy dogs that are helping kids that, again, may just need a friend or a companion at home. It helps provide support for them. Um, you know, a lot of the kid dogs we have that work with children who have autism, um, they can anticipate or help calm down when they're feeling anxious or when they're having a bad moment, and they can help calm the child down, get him back to a level place. But one of the things I like to talk about with our dog program, I really like to emphasize that the Ability Center doesn't just help the disability community, it helps the whole community. Because when we get people with disabilities in the community, it makes the community better. But our services are just beyond that. We about 50% of our dogs don't make it into service. And what we do with the other 50%, some of them go into law enforcement, they get retrained. We have a wonderful program here that we invented called Agility Angels. And Agility Angels teaches dogs the agility course, that obstacle course. And we have the kids with cognitive disabilities and autism learn how to train and manage the dog. And when they reach a certain level, we take them out to compete. And so that's really kind of cool. And so the dogs are great. They're also a gateway into the organization.
That's a wonderful program you got with all the dogs and assistance it provides. You're talking a lot about changing the narrative both for people with disabilities and people without disabilities, and that you're making more touches. So I know in 2020 you guys launched the Think Differently campaign. Can you tell me a little bit more about that and what you're doing?
So yeah, it's in line with a lot of what we just spoke about. It's getting people to think differently about disability. We started out before I got here. The Ability Center launched a campaign to make Toledo one of the most disability-friendly communities in the country. And we're an older city. We have weather, and it's not going to be easy to make this place physically accessible. It's not going to happen overnight. We have a lot of work to do. But there's two ways to make a city disability friendly. One is the accessibility part, and we're working on that. But the other part is how you feel about disability and how and inclusion, right? You can be a shop owner or a YMCA or whatever it may be that's physically accessible. But if people with disabilities don't feel welcome, if the programming is not inclusive, they're not going to go. And so it's getting people to keep that in mind and make sure they build that into their planning. One of the great things about Toledo is we have a very supportive community. We have a community that really has engaged and embraced this process, and we're very lucky about that. We have great community partners, and they lean on us, and it's just wonderful.
That's awesome. And so as a for people living independently in the community, why is it so important that they have access to support and services to do that?
Look, disability is normal. Right, and the only way you actually see it as normal is if you see it every day. You have to see people with disabilities in your workforce, in the store, at your church, wherever it may be, and then disability becomes normal. It's less of a thing. Um, One of the ways we go about this, I started this in Berkeley, and I brought it here to Toledo, and it's really well received. I I started this disability awareness experience. And I want to be careful because what I'm talking about is not simulation. Simulation is not what it's not it's a bad thing. That's not this. What it is I believe that people with disabilities and people without disabilities have this invisible barrier. And part of it is people without disabilities are afraid to talk to us. They're afraid to offend. They don't know what to say. They're uncomfortable. They don't want to look like they're uncomfortable. And so the easiest solution is we don't speak at all. I don't speak to you. I started I start the process by asking people how many people here have actually spoken to a person who's blind about life, love, whatever, and you can tell it's almost never. And so, it's ridiculous. And so, what we aim to do is remove the discomfort. I take all my staff and we run the gamut of disability. And I ask the two rules. One is you have to participate. The second rule is you have to ask every question you've ever wanted to ask of anybody with a disability, but have been afraid to ask. In the next,
Put it all out on the table.
get it all out on the table. My staff will not be offended, and they will answer any question you have. But when you leave here, no more questions. And what happens is, and then we let them play games. I let them play wheelchair basketball. They play go ball. They learn how to use a white cane. They race power wheelchairs. I put them in an environment that's fun, because if I put them around a conference table, nobody will speak. If I get them in an environment where they're playing, they put their guard down. And a lot of times, especially for wheelchairs, at some point when they were a child, they saw someone in a wheelchair, and mom said, don't touch that. And that has festered in their head into adulthood. And they've just really wanted to try, like the wheelchair. And so it's like my children, they're 4 years old. I give them a new toy, they play with it for 5 minutes, they don't care about it anymore. It's like it's no longer interests them. And so what happens, which really amazing, is in the first hour of this, you get a lot of questions about disability. Almost all the questions are about why is the wheelchair this way? How do you, transfer to a shower or whatever it may be. But in the second hour, it becomes, oh, you're a dad? You like the New York Giants? Oh, where'd you meet your wife? And you start to realize we have a lot in common. And you start to forget about the disability because now you're focused on the things we have in common. We would have never gotten to that place if I didn't let you get all these questions out, if I didn't let you get over this invisible barrier. And so it's really kind of cool. We contract with companies, they pay us to do it for them. And so that's really one of the things I'm really proud about. I love doing those.
That's absolutely brilliant. You're having the hard conversations, the important conversations. You're through experience, you're changing perspective. And I love how it's through play. Like the exercise of play is very hands-on, or it's very, there's that movement, there's that interconnection that you guys are applying to the environment. And it's absolutely, I love what you're doing. I've never heard it be done like that. And it's such a great teaching moment.
Well, thank you. I really like it too. The play environment does a couple things. Some people ask a question in front of a group, but sometimes they just think their question is so embarrassing, but they've always wanted to know. They're able to just take somebody off to the side and say, hey, what about this? And we work with the staff, so they're very prepared. They know that this may be difficult for them to deal with in the beginning, but at the end, we're really changing the dynamic of the way our community sees disability and sees us. And it's for our benefit to just do it ourselves to get over this hurdle. The other thing I'm doing now that I'm really excited about, we haven't started. It'll start the end of October, and it's in line with the same thinking. Is I partnered with one of our local school systems, and we're going to put adaptive sports into the PE curriculum. And part of it is again to make people comfortable around the equipment that we use, to make sure that they realize it's no longer a mystery. This my wheelchair, your wheelchair. It's not a negative. It's a negative if we don't have it. It's a positive, and in fact, it's fun. In some ways, it's fun. Like
In many
uh,
ways, it's fun. But fun is in the eye of the beholder or in the experience. Like there's so many ways to have fun, and fun can be different. Fun can be, you know, we get to write whatever rules we want and have the perspectives we need. So um,
you know when we do the disability awareness experience, there's two things are amazing to me. One is sometimes how difficult it is to get someone in a wheelchair because they're just petrified. It's like an omen, and I have to force them to do it. because the rule is you have to participate. So I don't let them leave until they do it. But the second thing is they realize even when they're in our power wheelchairs, wow, this is kind of cool. Like, you know, for you, for example, how you actually maneuver the chair is really interesting to a lot of people. They've often wondered how you do it, but they've never been able to ask you. And so now we're like, get in, we're going to show you one. We have a demo. And, you know, it's not simulation. Simulations, oh, how tough my life is because I'm in a wheel. We don't do that. We say, this is fun. Look, I have a wife, a girlfriend. This is just a tool I use. And you know what? It's not so scary. Let me show you how to use it. And they find it interesting.
No, that's awesome. That's a unique approach to go about it, but I think it's it, there's if we could do more of that across the country, I think we'd be changing a lot more perspectives, having more of the right conversations, having really changing the narrative altogether. So Stuart, that's so very cool. So if people want to learn more about the great services at the Ability Center, can you give me your website and what part of the website they need to go to learn more about that?
Yeah, you can go to theabilitycenter.org. There's a lot of information there, and I think we make it fairly entertaining because we want people to, again, enjoy the site and really change their relationship to their disability. So we try to emphasize fun. We just did a family fun day here with our youth program. We have a beautiful 17-acre property here that's like a park. And so we had like a carnival to get families engaged with us. And everything here is inclusive. We actually had inclusive tree climbing. No matter how disabled you were, they could get you up a tree.
That's
And so
awesome.
for kids, it was fantastic. Um, we want to emphasize, it. Don't get me wrong. There is a lot of negative around disability. I have one. I could talk to you about all day long about my hospital visits, but it's not all doom and gloom. And if I have a wife, I have two great kids, I've traveled all around the world, I've done cool things too, and I want kids with disabilities or people who are newly acquired disabilities to realize that there's a big world in front of them, and there's a lot of people who are already doing things. You're not going to be the first, and you're a trial lawyer. It's not going to be the first, right? Um, I worked in sports and professional sports. There's people already doing these things. We just don't talk about them enough, and we don't celebrate the successes enough.
Well, you're doing incredible work, Stuart, and thank you so much for being on accessiBe's Spotlight sessions today. Thank you for your time. Thank you for all that you do, that you continue to do, and just an awesome, awesome guest.
Thank you for having me. I hope you get to come to Toledo some point.
I would love that. Absolutely love that. And to all of our viewers, thank you for joining us today and for staying to the end. And until next time, take care, everyone.